All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I am your host, Damon Pistolka, and I'm going to turn the names on for my special guest today because we are going to be talking about eliminating late from your manufacturing scheduling. I've got Trevor Calder right over there. I've got Mark Lilly right down there. We're going to be talking about it. They wrote a book that we will be discussing is Never Late is Better. That's a good title for that. So let's get started like we always like to. Let's have the guests introduce themselves and talk about it. Let's go ahead, Mark. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How you got into scheduling, manufacturing, ERP, integration kind of stuff. Tell us about it.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks for having us. We got together, Trevor and I got together several years ago, but the story starts way before then. And we actually kind of worked together without knowing each other. And I'll explain that in a moment too. But my dad in particular, who passed away a couple of years ago, but he started several different manufacturing ERP systems, specifically for custom manufacturers like job shops. Yeah, one was called Profit Key way back in the 1980s.
Oh yeah.
Another, you may have heard of it. Yeah. Another was Visual Manufacturing, which was created in 1992. Now my dad actually sold that to Infor in 2004. But both of those systems still have Profit Key, by the way. We have no financial interest in it anymore, but it was recently sold to ECI of Job Boss and M1 fame, right? E2 fame. And Visual, of course, is actually still being sold, net new out there. But what we found was both of those software products still have the traditional finite scheduling model embedded in them, right? Really good software, just like a lot of ERP systems have really good software. But what we found with Profit Key and Visual, and we still find today with any ERP, is that most manufacturers struggle with scheduling. They struggle using these tools. And so we took a hard look at it to understand, why this is, but they struggle with. It's not that the software is broken. Again, it's the approach, right? You're having to get all your data right. Your run times have to be pretty close to perfect. You have to run this capacity loading algorithm, i.e., the scheduling program, to create your beautiful Gantt chart, right? And then once that beautiful Gantt chart is created, well, what do companies do? Well, they kind of throw it over the wall to production and go execute it, right? And when those folks get it, they look at it and go, gee, these priorities look a lot different than what we talked about in the production meeting this morning, right? Number one. And number two, especially in a custom manufacturing environment, a high mix, low volume job shop, make to order, however you want to describe it, 5 minutes later, something changes, right? A customer calls, changes a due date. Your best setup person doesn't show up. The material doesn't arrive on time. So you feel like you got to go rerun that schedule to adjust your priorities. And it's just a never-ending loop. So we've come up with a very different method that actually reverses a lot of that. That's what we're excited to share with you today.
Awesome. Well, Mark, your company is Lilly Works. I forgot to mention that when we opened. Trevor Calder, from where are you at in Australia, Trevor?
I'm in Brisbane, sunny downtown Brisbane.
Oh, awesome. Well, Trevor with PFM Works, been working with production. I love what you say on your LinkedIn profile. It's about, I got it right here. So great. It's software that manages production so you don't have to do it in Excel or on whiteboards. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about your background, Trevor, and how you guys got what you're doing and how you guys connected up to do this book.
Yeah, so many years ago, I went to work for an engineering company and they wanted an ERP system. So they wanted someone that understood manufacturing and IT, so they could marry it all together. And we went through a selection process, and we actually chose visual for the product. So then, I was a customer, and the owner of the company knew I was going to get bored. So then he kind of organized so I could jump the fence and went and work for the local channel partner. So I went and worked as a visual consultant for a number of years, and a bit like Mark saying, everyone kind of, and like I say on the website, everyone buys an ERP system to manage production, yet they end up managing it in Excel. And it took forever to kind of work out why it is. And if you think about it, it's like Mark's been saying, like the model itself, everything has to be perfect, and life's not like that. So it doesn't kind of represent reality. So that's why when we go out to Excel, we can kind of deal with those things, that we know this material is going to be laid or this is happening. So we adjust it around in Excel, and it becomes easy to manage production that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I'd written a book that about execution, because like we're sort of saying, the schedule creates a plan that we give to everyone, and we expect them to execute it. And then when you don't quite get the results that you expect, like, is it a bad plan, or is it the people not following the plan? So, and that's where the execution element comes in terms of, okay, well, given this instant in time, what's the most important thing we should be doing? And getting everyone focused on the right priorities and that sort of thing. And with the guys with Lilly Works, what they've done with the predicted flow manufacturing and the dynamic production method, which we'll have a look at soon, it kind of encapsulates all of that together. Wow. And people kind of want a software solution. So we ended up becoming a channel partner, and Mark and I have been working quite closely for a while, and we were trying to, because people kind of come to us for a scheduling solution, but we tell them we don't schedule. So it's kind of counterintuitive. And then with the book, at least we could kind of explain some of the principles behind it and how it is actually different, and trying to get the message out there that it's not the software's fault. The software is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's just the fact that what we're getting it to do doesn't make a lot of sense when you sit back and think about how life is and how things pan out.
That's a great point, because it's doing what it's supposed to do, but what we're asking it to do does not mirror real life.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's really one of the big disconnects is, as Trevor mentioned, most manufacturers, when they buy their ERP, scheduling is on the top of the criteria list.
Oh yeah.
Right? And there are a ton, there have been a ton of software sales, ERP sales made. And back when we sold Visual and Profkey, the same thing. They would buy based on, how your beautiful Gantt chart, the fact that you could do finite capacity loading and things like that. And it's fantastic. The issue is what we're asking these scheduling tools for, what we expect them to give us is really very simple, but unfortunately they're not delivering. And that's why folks go out to Excel. Simple things like, objectively, when should I start a job? Right?
Yeah,
we'll talk about that now, because if you don't, right, you kind of smiled, you probably know, because if you don't have that visibility, well, what happens? Well, if I'm production manager and I'm not sure when I sure as heck don't want to start it late, so I'm gonna start it early, maybe really early. Right now you're flooding WIP with all sorts of stuff that doesn't need to be out there, clogging things up, slowing things down, confusing the true priorities, right? So that's one of the first issues we address. But back to the visibility, and that's a key word too, is visibility. Folks, when they buy a scheduling tool, really what they're asking for is visibility, because that's what they struggle with. When should we start jobs? Do we have the material to even do it? If we know when we want to start it? Once it is started, and I'm in a midstream workstation, and I've got 5 jobs sitting in front of me, objectively, really, not the one that I'd like to work on because I kind of like to fast set up, or I'd like running that easy job, but really, which job should I be working on for the benefit of the whole company, for the benefit of the on-time delivery or throughput or whatever we want to maximize for that job, for the whole company, right? So having having the visibility in the here and now, so we call that current current execution visibility so critical so that all the production folks are making the right decisions at the right time, and they have the information at their fingertips to be able to do that. So critical. Now, the $60,000 question is when the salesperson comes down to production or the customer's calling, asking, when can I get that order, right? What credibility right? And oftentimes it's, the folks in production are having to say, okay, let me take that question, and then they're gonna kind of walk around, right? They're gonna walk around and see what the queue times are. Go kind of find out when, based on everything that's going on, when, well, that shouldn't need to happen, right? And what happens if something happens? Because that's the guy who's been here for 35 years, right? So, and he's got most of it in his head. So what happens if something happens to that person, they decide to leave? So those questions should be answerable, and we believe, we don't just believe, our customers have shown us that our model supports having confidence in even the future visibility, and that's really key. So once you have future visibility, now you have credibility in terms of when things will be able to finish. You've got an accurate or a believable load versus capacity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where am I going to have people problems in the future? Where am I going to have machine constraints, or, where might I have material problems? Like you meant before we started, you mentioned working in a facility that had 1.5 year lead times on materials, right? Mm-hmm. It'd be nice to see what the impact of that is on production if that date were to move one way or another, right? So, mm-hmm. so that future visibility is key. And then the other thing about the future visibility is if you have any sort of tool that allows what ifs, right? So what if I change capacity in some fashion, either adding shifts, if I'm actually able to hire people, or if I add a machine, or negative impact, what if a machine goes down, or what if sales gets that big order and puts that out additional load, right? All that information. What is the impact of that going to be on our overall on-time delivery? What impact would it have on other jobs? And even from a financial perspective, what impact is it going to have? You're not able to do those sorts of what ifs, and they're not, and they shouldn't be believable if the foundation, if your future foundation visibility is not believable, mm-hmm. right? And that's really the goal of implementing and establishing this approach, the dynamic production method, which our software helps you do, but it helps you establish, first off, credibility in the priorities, right? Initially, does production believe it? And is it truly maximizing what you want to maximize? And then believability and credibility in the phases that come after.
Yeah. So your thoughts in this, Trevor, and as you see people that are struggling to use an ERP system, what are some of the common things that you run into as well?
Yeah, so we're really, just building on what Mark's sort of saying there about, creating that picture of reality. And if you think about the schedule itself and the way that it works, if it's giving you a bad answer and you go, well, actually our process times are out. We're saying it should take 4 hours when really it takes 3 or takes 5. And you start to think, well, of course it's not going to give me a good answer. So then you get this focus on accuracy. We need this more accurate information because then we'll get a better result. And, people have to try and, because I know there's going to be this variation, they try and trick up the ERP system a bit, so they're, overinflating like times or adding some move times, or it's kind of this cultural, not a tribal kind of knowledge too, where, people kind of go, well, if this department's loaded to 120%, well, that's fine. Because, they know this is kind of variation in there and it's going to be okay. But you don't really know what's real and what's not.
Yeah.
So, so instead of tricking it up, and with the approach that we've got in the dynamic production method, we know there's going to be variation. So we're actually planning for it and very specific about it. So we can work with good enough information. So the more uncertain we are, the bigger the buffer we have to put in. But if we're a bit more, we're more of a controlled environment and it's a bit more stable, then okay, we can have a little bit less of a buffer. Because what this is, like I'm saying, it's going to do, it's going to absorb this variation as it occurs, and it's also going to protect the due date. Because when you're making your promises to people, your want date needs to be protected. That's your commitment to your customer. So if you miss that, then everyone gets upset. But now we've got it protected, and we know if things are going wrong in advance, that we can be a lot more proactive and, make those changes. So we're going to get it out on time.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned this earlier too. That's awesome, because that brings up the great point. Really, what everyone's wants to make sure of is the customer gets the product when they want it.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the end.
Yeah.
Did we, all the way through, are we going to get it to the end? And the second thing, like you said, Mark, too, is a finite capacity scheduling, like most ERP systems have. You run the schedule, and as soon as you run it, it's like a battle plan. As soon as the battle starts, it's no good anymore.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the key thing that we've done there. We've actually flipped it, because normally, you create the plan and you execute. We execute, then we plan. So, we don't have to run the schedule to work out what everybody needs to work on. With the approach that we've got, by determining that, which job is in greater threat of being late, we know what the priorities are for everybody. And we don't need to know capacity to do that. Because, if you think about it, you've got a to-do list. Here's my priorities for the day. If I get them all done or not is a different question. But this is what I should be working on first, and then next, and then next. So by that decoupling there, it's really just changed the whole ball game.
Oh, I can see that. So this is good stuff. So what you guys came together, how did you guys start working together? Then how did the book come about? I mean, how did it come? Just wanted to say, well, we should write a book on this. I mean, just talk about that a little bit. Just take it over, you guys.
Well, yeah. So, just to be clear, Trevor and I didn't invent the dynamic production method or write PFM software, right? It's actually the people who wrote Profit Key and wrote Visual are the same folks who actually invented it. My brother, Mike Lilly, Dave Lane, who is the primary development guy behind Visual in particular. The two of them, my brother did a lot of the design, the mental design work and inventiveness around the dynamic production method and protected flow manufacturing. And he drew from a lot of, he was a TOC Jonah. Way back in the mid 90s, he became a Jonah. But it's not strictly TOC. There's a lot of lean concepts.
Yeah.
There's concepts from mathematical Q theory, in particular, managing WIP using Little's law, for example, mathematical Q theory. And certainly, some Six Sigma type of statistical aspects to it as well. But so I've been basically in a marketing and sales role, and it's very interesting because it's an entirely new approach to scheduling, right? So most of the, when we get on and do a demo, a lot of it is an educational process, right? Within an hour-long demo, we're kind of educating these folks who have never heard of DPM or PFM on this new approach. And there's a couple things that I won't say we struggle with, but that come up. One is, and Trevor mentioned it, and I think you kind of, your eyebrows went up a little bit, is that this execution, in the execution phase where we're just focusing on priorities and getting the right priorities out, the priorities are by design and on purpose blind to your overall capacity, right? And that can, if you've been doing finite scheduling for 25, 30 years, and somebody comes and tells you you're going to establish priorities without looking at capacity, some have a hard time wrapping their head around that and getting beyond that. But it's not that we ignore it at all. Yeah. When, as Trevor mentioned, when we run that simulator, when we start to look in the future, when we absolutely bring all sorts of and all the capacity into the picture, even material availability. The other thing that's interesting around the buffering, when we talk about buffering, is that some people think, oh, well, geez, I can easily get everything on time if I just add more buffer to my lead times, right? Easily. But that's not what we're doing. That's not what, and that's a key point, is when we see manufacturers are using buffers today, but they just don't realize it. So we ask them two questions so that it kind of dawns on themselves. And that is, give me a typical lead time, right? If sales comes down to production and says, hey, when can I get this, ABC type part out to my customer, right? And usually we often hear like six to 8 weeks, right? So let's say 8 weeks. So I've got an 8-week production lead time. Then the next question, of course, is, okay, I know this isn't reality, but just imagine nothing else is in production, right? It's just this job. You have all the material, all the people, all the machines are standing at the ready. How long would it actually take for that material to get that part created through all of its processes, right? On this 8-week lead time part. And most say, a week or two, maybe, if it has to go outside. Sometimes the answer is 3 or 4 days. Sometimes the answer is hours, right? So there's right that touch time. The rest of it is what we're going to call buffer, and that's a really good starting point to the conversations. When we implement this method, we have several conversations. In fact, we want the production folks telling the system how big their buffers should be so that they're comfortable and they get that value added time. And then you have some really great conversations, because if a part is always late, you probably don't have enough buffer for it. Okay, great. But if it's always early and you're always, getting it done faster than normal, then you can probably lessen that buffer. And now you might be controlling WIP too. So now if I've got a smaller buffer, that means I don't have to send work out as soon. So now my WIP's going to drop, accelerating everything that's out there already. So it's all interconnected, and one improvement in one area drives improvements in another.
Yes. It's amazing when you look at what's behind scheduling and trying to do it in software and how much there is to it.
Yeah.
Well,
thing with the dynamic production method, the way that PFM does it, if we really reflect the way that production processes it, because the guys out there, if they sort of select the jobs, they would kind of go like this. This is how they would process it, which is different to what the ERP system's telling them. But when you bring PFM in, we're really reflecting the way that they would prioritize and process the jobs a lot more, because it's, reflective, because the guys on the floor kind of know what's going on. They do it all the time. They're the experts in the area. So we have to kind of take that on board a lot. Yeah.
So as you're starting to talk to people about this, I mean, as you said, it's part of a system that you're doing. What really drew you guys together to put a book together around the system?
Oh, well, Trevor wanted to get DPM and PFM, going in Australia and New Zealand, Indonesia, wherever internationally, and that's been great. So he's really been, our international channel partner, and I've even been over two or three times, just twice. Yeah, this will be the third time coming up for Australian Manufacturing Week.
Nice.
So that's been a great event, and reception. We get a tremendous amount of leads through that. It's been great. So, but just Trevor's own excitement about it, and him having gone through the process of writing a book. I may or may not have told him that I felt like I had enough content, and you can tell I kind of can't stop talking, right? But about it. So I've got a huge amount of content in my head. So I said, I probably have enough for a book. And he suggested we do it together. I thought it was a great idea. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. Because it helps to establish, us as like experts, and it gets the ideas out there, and people can kind of understand, because we're talking very different language some of the time and a different approach where if people read the book and things like that, they start to understand it a lot more and kind of, because we kind of explain why the traditional approach doesn't work and what's been tried over the years, and then why this approach works and that sort of thing. So it just makes it a bit more I think easier for people to understand those concepts, because that's part of the problem. Like Mark's saying, in a demonstration, we're spending probably half of that time trying to explain the concepts behind it. So at least that way, if they come in a bit more of an understanding of these newer concepts, we can go a bit deeper and into some more functionality that's relevant to their environment, that sort of thing.
The method and the application of it is pretty simple. We can do a demo. We can do a demo in 20 minutes at the end of the day, right? But you want to give, especially if they have a lot of experience with the traditional method, because this is so different than it. We like to give them some background about why do folks struggle with the traditional method of scheduling, and then go into some of the concepts that make the dynamic production method really work. And we do that in an even deeper way in the book. We go into some really deep concepts. Let me give you one that's really kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And this goes back a little bit to the area of theory of constraints, and you may know why if you've ever read The Goal by Ellie Goldratt. But Ellie would always talk about, and the theory of constraints talks about, driving utilization versus throughput, right? Versus maximizing throughput. Well, there's no free lunch, right? You can only maximize one thing, and the stark contrast between utilization and actually queue time. So there's an exponential inverse relationship between the length of your queue times out in production, okay, meaning how long any job is going to have to wait for its turn on any particular resource, and utilization. So what does that mean? That means the higher you push up utilization, okay, that what you're having to do is you're having to make sure there's material at every machine, essentially, if you want to drive your utilization up towards 100%. But what are you doing? You're flooding WIP with material that doesn't, and oftentimes material that doesn't need to be there. So it's not necessarily satisfying a customer order or an order even for inventory that was planned for. No, it's there to drive up utilization, right? So now you have this expanded WIP. So the higher you drive utilization exponentially, the longer your lead times are going to become.
If you think about
people don't realize that.
Yeah, like if you think about driving to work, when it's rush hour or peak hour, it takes a lot longer, but it's the same distance. So what's happening here? It's all the other cars on the road, and if you think about if you own the roads and you want them highly utilized, well, that would mean I want cars everywhere. Now my roads are really highly utilized, but then my time to get to work is going to suck. I've got, so it's going to take so long because there's so many cars out there. So, as you start to move them off the road, well, then it's a nice journey to work. It's quite smooth. And so, if you think about you getting there faster and more enjoyable, that's what you want for your business. As that material flows through the manufacturing organization from the start to the end, your customers are getting what they need. So, the money will flow and everything else around it. Your customers are going to be happy. So there's, it's more the point, like in terms of okay, it's getting work through that's more important than, having everything highly utilized. Get off track with that and focus on the wrong thing.
Yes, because utilization is no good if it's not actually producing something that's going to go out the door, right? Or that you need right now.
You're just busy.
But a lot of people, still to this day measure utilization of a process in between other processes without relative consideration of what's happening before and after. You know, am I flooding behind? Am I flooded up to it? With stuff to work on, and really about the overall thing, because we've done that years ago when I was running manufacturing facilities. We would figure out with lean manufacturing, you just quit worrying about utilization, honestly, in a lot of respects. And you just figure out, how do I get my overall system to flow at the rate that I need to support my customers?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how that takes away the complexities that you add when I'm like, I got to, there's a big expensive piece of equipment. We got to run that thing.
Get it busy.
It just because all that does is creates these big piles of money that are sitting out there in WIP, and it can create big piles of money and, ahead of it, just the material that you have to buy to stay ahead of it. And with not much regard to what's actually going out the door.
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing that we have as part of the dynamic production method as well is the real-time prioritization.
Yeah.
So those jobs which are out there, like we're like an emergency department. Whoever gets the priority is the one who's most needs the attention, not necessarily who arrived first. Because obviously if someone comes in with, maybe they've cut their finger and someone's having a heart attack, well, you need to see the guy with the heart attack first, not the guy with the cut finger, because he arrived first. So with our approach, all the resources then, so we've got less jobs out there, so it flows faster. But the real-time prioritization means that when I go to get my next job, I'm going to be working on the most important job as well.
That's huge.
So that way, it really does flow better. And what's flowing is the right things.
Yeah. So you mentioned this, Mark, the difference from interacting with the traditional ERP scheduling to the DPM system and interacting with that on the daily basis. Talk about that a little bit, because I think it's, it'd be wonderful to see the kind of what a day looks like and then what a day looks like.
Sure. So big picture, as Trevor described, we've fundamentally reversed the model. So instead of, asking a computer, a capacity loading algorithm, computer program to come up with your plan and then your resulting priorities, we establish priorities in real time. And the way we do that is every work order as it comes out, we either run standalone. If you don't have an ERP system, most of our customers have an ERP already, so we pull their information over. That information gets automatically pulled over, whether it's, real time with some of the ERPs we support do. Others are, on a scheduled net change basis. So the work order information comes over, and every work order it gets its own unique execution plan. And that execution plan, very simply, is the due date is the anchor point. I've got the buffer time, which again, we discuss in length in our implementation approach, and then the estimated work that needs touch time that needs to be done. So that is the execution plan. That establishes when we should start the work, as if we're comfortable with that buffer, why start it much earlier, right? And unnecessarily flood WIP. We know when to start it. Once it is started, to Trevor's point, we use what's called a threat level priority. And this is really key. This is really important, because traditional scheduling tools use due date, right? Seems to make perfect sense. In a make to order environment, a very important piece of information, but it's a poor priority mechanism. Why? Because especially in a high mix environment, you're going to have, right, a 20-week lead time job that's more in danger of being late if we don't get started on it today than a job that may even be due a week or two out from now, right? That could afford to wait longer based upon how much work needs to be done, how often it needs to go outside and back, and those sorts of things, right? So in traditional scheduling, we're prioritizing everything by the earliest due date. Well, you're working on all those early jobs, but the ones that are due later but have more work get very high risk and maybe are late already, even though it's way before the due date, right? Just based on the amount of work still left to be done.
Yeah.
And that's what we solve instantly. We give folks the visibility, as Trevor mentioned, what job in any department, any work center down to the machine or person level is most important to be worked on right now. And we do that. It's a real-time calculation, a real-time priority.
We can typically do that, sort of 1 to 3 months. Our customers are running live with it too. So it's not this lengthy sort of process that we have to go through.
Yeah.
It's quite quick and effective. And, just to build on that, so that's all real and now, that's all execution. But obviously you want to see the future as well.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of the traditional finite capacity scheduling algorithm kind of loading stuff up into the future, what the DPM model does, it simulates you executing your priorities into the future. So it's looking at those future points in time. What is the priority job going to be on these resources? Then we can see when things are predicted to finish. And because it's simulating the way you execute the priorities, it's a much better representation of how production is likely to pan out. And you also then able to see in advance, well, okay, I'm going to have problems in these areas. Then I can be proactive planning to say, well, I'm going to have a problem around these areas in a few weeks' time. Well, what if I did some overtime now, or outsource this and do these different things? So with the simulation, it's like a digital twin. So we can change some of those parameters. We'll add some overtime, add some capacity or take it away, or change it up in the different ways. And then we can simulate you doing what you plan to do and these changes. And then we can have a look at the impact on lateness or revenue and all these different factors. So you can kind of work out, which decision is going to be best for the organization. And even in some cases, if it means you're going to be late, at least you can tell your customer now. Yeah. I know for me, like if my supplier calls and say, well, look, sorry, we've had some problems here. I know we said it would be Monday, but it's probably going to be Friday, but we're trying to get it sooner. To me, well, at least I know now and I can adjust around it.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing worse than when I have to call when it's supposed to be here on Monday and they don't even know what's going on and things like that. So it just creates that better customer experience. And, then you, as a customer, you trust the supplier a lot more when they're keeping you in the loop and, you can react to what's going on. So.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're using the dynamic production method, so we're sitting here today, we're in our old traditional ERP system. We move into the dynamic production method. We're getting rolling with this. What kind of results do they see difference in results? What are the comments that you hear back from people that implement the dynamic production method, and stop using their finite capacity scheduling models?
So one of the biggest impacts that folks see is the reduction in WIP. Right now, with that so on the priority list. So Matt, our priority list, right, it can be published on a big screen TV. You can certainly print it out. You can put it on we have an app on the iPhone or your Android device to see what your priority should be. But that can be filtered. So you can filter it to say, show me everything that is here now or will be coming through this department.
Yeah.
Or you can say, just show me the next, 5 days of work. Or you can say, just show me the items for which I have materials. You can say, just show me the items I have materials for and that I should be starting, right? That execution plan's date is now or was yesterday or before, right? So I should, anything that I shouldn't be starting yet, just leave off the list, right? So now I'm not starting work too early, sending work out prematurely. So it's this reduction in WIP, and we haven't published it yet. We just have a brand new case study where this was a major factor for this company.
Yeah,
and that dramatic drop in WIP over the first few months of implementing the priorities is huge. Yeah. Now, whatever is out in WIP, along with the threat level, the right priority, just flows through its resources. On-time deliveries go up, lead times go down.
Yeah. Well, and WIP, I mean, WIP is kind of like weight, right? We build a pound here, put a pound on here or there, and the next thing you know, I got 20 I don't need.
Right.
And
right.
The only thing in business, it usually equates into hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions over a decade.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I really see that this would be cool, because your reduction in WIP is, I mean, it's everything. It's everything from yes, the dollars that's in the material, the labor that you had to put into whatever step you are in the processing, but it also demands a larger facility, larger maintenance, more people to move material, all these kinds of things that just, because if I can produce, just say I'm producing $10 million or something, and if I can produce it with $100,000 of WIP or $1 million in WIP, that's a lot less money that's in play, but a lot less facility I need just to store that other extra $900,000 of product.
Absolutely.
And people in it, it's so much when you look at reduction of WIP. The other thing, do people say that they feel like it's less stressful running these facilities because of the prioritization that you're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's less running around, right? Folks know, like today they an operator needs to go find their supervisor to know what to work on next, or what do we have the material to work on the job that they have the traveler forwards the material here. They don't have to run around anymore. It's right there. They can see it, right? So,
and the supervisors don't get calls at nighttime from like afternoon shifts saying, what should I work on or what have you? It's all there. And if anything kind of happened, it'll just adjust itself, so the guys are kind of getting their time back. And, some people are, because you're kind of doing the work for the system without PFM, you're putting into Excel and adjusting everything. Then if something changes, you have to go and do all the work. Where with this method in place, it's a lot easier because it's doing it for you. You're just kind of making sure we've got our dates right and the other bits and pieces, people following the priorities, and then the rest just happens.
Yeah. And then the flexibility of being able to change on the fly, like looking like, okay, a month from now, it looks like we're going to have some late orders. Well, let's work a Saturday or two, and looking at that, what will it do? I mean, I'm talking about that today rather than talking about it when we're already late and we got to get caught back up. That's a huge thing.
That's it. Yeah.
It really just make it a lot more proactive planning rather than reactive planning, because that's, I think, quite often what happens. Oh, we're late. What are we going to do? When now we're sort of saying, hey, we're looking in the future here. We've got something on the horizon that could be a problem, or is likely to be a problem. Let's do something now. So it's a lot less chaotic, the environment, because you've planned for it, what's going to happen, and you're making these changes to influence the future. Yeah, and it's also cool. I think your resources are a lot more effective, and like you were sort of saying before with the WIP, if the resources are making things that you don't need, they're just going to sit there. Well, they're not making things that you do need. So they kind of suffer as a result of that. So, the organization's less effective. So as soon as everyone's not working on things that they shouldn't be, you're working on things that you should be. And then, it obviously flows better. Your on-time delivery goes up as well. And, everybody's happy.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are you guys excited about in the world of manufacturing scheduling? What is coming up that you just go, wow, we're working on the dynamic production method. That's fun and all, but we are really excited for this that's coming down the pipe.
To get the method out there, because I would love to see the dynamic production method being the standard way that manufacturers use, not the finite capacity. So in that sense, we're trying to change, everybody in manufacturing to go, that model, it's got its problems. To make it work, there's a lot that has to be done. But if you adopt the dynamic production method, life's a lot easier, and it just kind of works.
Nice.
So I'd really like to see that become the norm.
Yeah. Yeah. And you, Mark?
Well, there's some things we're already working on, such as just taking the priorities now, and like for example, outside services, right? We have an outside services priority list that you can actually share with your outside services provider, right? Because right now they're probably working on a first in, first out basis, definitely. Right? Yeah. But the reality might be the one that just came in might be the hottest one that you need out and back, right? So you could virtually share the priority list with them to show them what their priorities are to be. Just have them log in and they'd be able to see it right there. Cool. The other thing, of course, is AI, right? And how do we apply AI to this? And there's all sorts of opportunities, one of which is the buffer sizing, right? So right now, the buffer sizing in these execution plans that we've been talking about is manual in the sense that we have a series of meetings during implementation, and the clients are telling us through a series of questioning and looking at them together about what the buffer sizing should be, and then over time we can see how they perform, how much buffer you're typically using in these types of jobs, so we can resize them and whatnot. But I think there's a real strong opportunity in AI to be able to, number one, establish buffer sizing proactively, right, dynamically for folks based upon historical information that they might have today, right out of the box. And then certainly as time goes on and we're getting measurements against how they're performing against the buffer sizes, that can be applied even more proactively, and even used in the future projection and the future predictions, right? In it.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because it's we hear AI and everything, and the real benefit I think that I've seen across the board and in applications like this is it can consider more variables that we really can contemplate, right?
Right.
If we put them all together down on a spreadsheet, that might be one thing and figured it all out, but AI can somehow do it, a lot more variables than we can, and come out with these things. Because you think about something like buffer sizing, it could be as detailed as seasonality and machine and material, and you could get down to even the labor setting and who's doing what, and adjusting that based on the scheduling of what's going through a certain cell or a certain department. So,
absolutely.
So cool. Well, guys, it's been awesome having you on today. And I tell you, scheduling is something that drives people absolutely batty sometimes in manufacturing. It's lovely to get to talk about it with you. If somebody wants to get a hold of you guys, so what's the best way? So we'll start with Trevor. If someone wants to talk to you, Trevor, how do they get a hold of you?
They could visit pfm.works or LinkedIn. Let's look for Trevor Calder or PFM Works on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Trevor. Well, Mark, yourself?
Yeah, same. Lilyworks.com or mark.lilly@lilyworks.com. If you want to email me, I'm certainly on LinkedIn too. You can feel free to reach out there as well.
Awesome, guys. Well, we had a comment from Daniel here. It was early on, but we were going hard. So he said, working proactively rather than reactively is such a powerful shift in mindset for managing production. No more firefighting behaviors. And I know from you guys listening to you today, the dynamic production method definitely helps with that. So thanks for being here today. Again, we had Trevor Calder here from PFM Works, and we had Mark Lilly, the president of Lilly Works, here talking about I can't see my title again. I'm so excited. Eliminating late from your manufacturing scheduling. They were talking about the dynamic production method of scheduling compared to finite capacity scheduling. Thanks so much for being here, guys.
It's great.
Thanks for having us.
And we will wrap.
Amazon. If you look up "Never Late is Better."
You can
find the book on Amazon. Almost forgot.
Oh God, I forgot. Thanks so much, Trevor. Hey, they do have a book. It's "Never Late is Better" on Amazon. I'm actually looking at it right here. Never Late is Better. Production scheduling reinvented for manufacturing performance. You're going to see their lovely mugs on there. Get it on Amazon today and learn what we're talking about, the dynamic production method, so you can go out and try it yourself and talk with these guys about it more. Jose stopped in. Excuse me. Fantastic topic. Looking forward to reading your book and learning more about DPM. Thanks so much for stopping by, Jose, and dropping the comment. We appreciate it. If you came into this late, go back to the beginning, because you want to listen to what Mark and Trevor were talking about with finite capacity scheduling compared to the dynamic production method of scheduling and how that will affect your operation. Reach out to these guys if you need more information on it. Get on Amazon. Never Late is Better. Check out their book. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Mark and Trevor, thanks again for being here. We're going to wrap up offline. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks so much.